It's time for another episode of The Wrong Idea. In case you're unfamiliar, being wrong is about embracing subjective experience over objective truth. We're not interested in being correct, we just want to explore our own insights and opinions. I'm Lucas, here with my brother Jack, and we are starting a new deep dive on personal knowledge management. Jack, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that means?
So, as human beings, especially in this modern age, we intake a whole lot of information every single day. I don't know what the statistic is, but I saw it one time. It's something like a ridiculously large amount of newspapers worth of information you get every single day. And keeping track of all of that is incredibly difficult to do, just for the fact that your brain is limited. You're only a human. And you and me both share the opinion, I believe, that having a way to offload a lot of the things that you would need to remember would enable you to use your brain for more, shall we say, effective or important things, or things that your brain is better at.
That's, I think, a really good way of summarizing it. It's really about leveraging what your brain is good at and trying to offload the more mechanical processes to a computer. I guess the interesting part to me about this is that because of recent innovations in AI, we're starting to see that the scope of what a computer can do has expanded. Whereas previously, I think it was much more focused on basically what you could use the computer for your own knowledge management is just kind of storing and organizing your information, taking notes essentially. But these new capabilities sort of broaden the horizons of maybe what a personal knowledge management system could or should do for us.
Yeah, it's mainly like you said, those innovations in AI, because there was a lot of limitations and bounds on what a computer could do. Like you said, it was essentially really useful for organizing all of the things so your life so wasn't chaotic or hectic, and you could basically do that with sort of any old system of notes that you sort of refined to work well for you. It's sort of organizing things that are, you want to keep separate. You don't want your school life or your work life to blend with your personal life, to blend with your life of passions and hobbies. It's sort of difficult to try and keep track of all that stuff. So just having a knowledge management system for the sake of keeping those separate is really important. But now, like you said, we have these capabilities with AI specifically is probably going to be the most important tool to use, which can sort of expand and enhance all of this knowledge which you have.
So you mentioned a couple of things there which I find interesting. For example, you are still in school. So there's knowledge management that you need to do there, like probably more so than anyone does once they're out of school. But maybe I mean I could argue that there's a fair amount of that that happens at work too, but I think that it's sort of school is the most structured that ever really gets. So for you, this is obviously very relevant. For me, I am dealing constantly with projects that I want to do on the side, research and investigations that I'm doing, my own actual like work for jobs. Like there are different areas of my life that I need to manage and keep track of, and one of the hardest things for me is having insights and not being able to remember them when I need them. So it's a big part of that for me is figuring out how to just get those insights into a system that makes it easy enough for me to find them when I need them. You know, it's also hard because sometimes you put things into a knowledge management system and they just go into the abyss. Like you almost can't find them. So I think for me, a big motivating force of why we want to even think about this topic is because it's not just about taking the right notes and keeping track of things that matter in your life. It's also about how we can find those things and then take action on them.
Absolutely. It's something that I really liked that you just said was, you don't want to forget the insights that you have, because something that happens quite often if I'm reading is I'll read a line that I really really like, and then I'll highlight it, and then it's kind of difficult to go and find lines in a book that you highlighted for a one off, or maybe say they prompted a thought and you notate it down. If you're using like the Kindle app like I do, then you can sort of create a little piece of text with goes with your annotation. But sometimes you lose track of those, and you lose track of what those mean and what the purpose of those was and why they were impactful to you at the time. But when you have a system to store them in, then you risk not forgetting them. But then, like you said, you do risk losing them in that system. So organizing them is incredibly important because, while your life is hectic as it is, organizing the knowledge that you have is equally as hectic. So you can't be haphazard with what you're doing.
These are all good points. And the other piece of this, which I guess I'd say the point of this deep dive for me is really that as I'm sort of building my personal knowledge management system, I want to be thinking about where we're going, where this stuff is headed, the next generation of these systems. Because again, now that the landscape is sort of changing in terms of what the computer can offload, I want to be designing my knowledge management system to anticipate those changes. I mean, there's some of this stuff that's here now, but basically all of the tools I've seen, even that integrate AI, are very limited, and they're not quite yet taking advantage of all the things that are even theoretically possible with the technology we have. So I'm trying to imagine what those systems will look like, and then start organizing and building my knowledge management system based on where I think we're headed.
This is interesting because, like you said, I'm still in school, and for me, being able to develop a system like this, being in school, getting ready to come out of it, going to college in the real world, there is a transition which is going to happen, and having a system to organize all of this stuff, I think, is going to be incredibly important. And if I somehow am able to create this sort of, like we've called it, a knowledge management system to separate off my sort of work life and college life that I will have to balance, I think it really sets me up for success. And you, having been in the workforce for a long time now, see the balance between balancing the work life and the personal life. So we sort of get two different little contrasting angles, and I guess I do also sort of have to balance the personal life aspect of it. But I certainly think that it will be incredibly advantageous for me to think about the future of these things, because if I'm ahead of the curve with this sort of knowledge management and note taking stuff, then I can only imagine how much easier college will be for me than it would have been for someone like you to try and manage all of the notes for the classes that you had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said there for sure in terms of just how different the experience will be. If I had had these tools available to me when I was in school, I mean, I would have been a different kind of productive. Like, I think it's just, it almost feels like it's, yeah, it's such a different level of capability that you couldn't have even fathomed when I was in school. Like, I don't know how, I don't know what it looks like, and I'm excited to even see what that is. But I guess for people listening along, the point of all of this is the journey we're about to go on is about discovering how to more effectively organize and manage our knowledge. And what that journey looks like is not entirely clear. I think we have some ideas about where we want to focus, but of course, we're interested in seeing how that develops as we continue through this deep dive, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have a sort of an idea of where we'd like to go, but again, it's also very murky and foggy, and we're sort of just taking a leap and seeing where we can go. But there's definitely a large number of things which I would assume would apply down the road, and certainly we will explore. If not, further with more things, we definitely have a bare couple of things here which we will dive into.
For sure. And I guess what I'm getting at is if there's things that people are interested in, want us to explore, have questions about, feel free, leave comments, ask questions. You can help direct these deep dives with us because it's as important to us as that you get our value out of this as we do, but we're certainly doing it based on what we think is important to us.
Absolutely. We've personalized this to ourselves. After all, this is sort of just our nice way to have some personal development time every single week that we take time to do. So whilst it's important for us to get value out of it, we want you guys to get value out of this too. We have our brains, you have your brains. If we combine the power of all that, then God, we're all just going to be incredibly wrong at the end of all this.
I love that. That's the right sentiment indeed. So, what are you thinking about in terms of the journey that we're about to take? Like, what does it look like for you?
So for me, I think one of the things that whilst we were planning this, I talked a lot about was the fact that computers allow you to offload a lot of the cognitive weight that you have to do with remembering stuff. You can sort of offload the memory side of stuff and allow your brain to do a little bit more of the abstraction and the creative stuff, and the drawing of connections is a little bit more free for you. You're not trying to, drag back at, say you're designing a room, you're not trying to drag back to the fucking random stool you found 3.5 months ago that you can't remember from IKEA. It's just there for you. So now you can focus on other things. You can try and find, you know, complementary pieces or things that might be better in place. It opens up your capabilities in terms of what your brain is capable of doing.
This is true. And I also, something that popped out when you were talking about that, you were talking earlier about this idea of like you're highlighting things in a book, and sometimes it's hard to know where to put those or what to do with those things. And it got me immediately thinking, because I've seen tools that are like web clippers or whatever, where like if you highlight certain things, you can just like very easily ingest them into other, like note taking apps and things like that. And it got me thinking that there are a lot of different tools and strategies and techniques out there that people have developed for knowledge management. And I think that as part of this journey, we're going to have to dive into that and explore what some of those existing tools are.
Absolutely. Going back and looking at the history of knowledge management is something that definitely interests me. It's going to be very cool to sort of see how that evolution happens. I like initially thought back, like one of the first things that comes to mind is like the whole Tibetan library. Like you have these grand, vast, expansive just stories of books with knowledge and information in them, and we haven't even translated most of it, but that has to be one of the earliest forms of a knowledge management system. It was simply books upon books upon books stacked upon each other, organized in some manner in a library, which people could go and research. And I think that you sort of see, I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm sure you and me are going to enjoy figuring out how we essentially have gotten to where we are today with note taking apps like Notion or Obsidian or Evernote, and then sort of us trying to look towards the future, maybe see what hasn't been seen or thought of yet. Just our take on what we think could be possible and what might happen.
As you were talking about this, the part that jumped out at me was that, yes, you're right. There were a lot of these grander knowledge management systems. Like, I think we had just decided on calling this personal knowledge management. And as soon as we started talking about that, I was like, huh, there's also sort of societal knowledge management, because like those systems were not just for one person, like anyone could take advantage of those things. So I don't know, immediately questions start coming up in my brain about how has that evolved, because at those times I think it was actually more efficient to have more centralized knowledge management solutions, whereas today, as information has become more ubiquitous, we have access to it at a much more personal scale, and so it's more reasonable to be thinking about personalized knowledge management.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. I'm thinking about even now this sort of concept of like you could almost essentially create those, like, I mean, I guess you sort of have YouTube and all of these things, but almost you could create a bit more of like a focused or creative service where you can sort of just create a library of knowledge created by the people, not set up by anything or anybody, but you can sort of just throw your knowledge in there in a more structured form. I don't know if that's been done yet. I know we have things like YouTube and Instagram and whatever. You got forums and stuff like that, but I mean, it's just interesting to think about if there was something very purpose built, almost sort of like one of those old school libraries for something more modern. Just wild capabilities that we have now with the internet and modern tech and video and audio and all of these things that we didn't have so way long back ago. It's just wild. There's so many things going through my head.
Yeah, well, there's actually a lot of aspects of that I had thought about when I was considering kind of the new generation of educational online platforms, where you're sort of able to organize and make your kind of knowledge graphs public so that people can see how you think about certain things and follow the way that you taught yourself something. And you might even have content creators that are literally doing courses like this, where you could go and find them and learn stuff. And I guess again, like, this is interesting because I'm thinking about personal knowledge management, and then you're also bringing up this idea of like, you know, we're sharing that personal knowledge management, like our own way of structuring things, with others. And maybe there's value in that for people where they can see, oh yeah, I can manage my stuff similar to this. So yeah, this is certainly a whole world. And then I'll just add on top of that, you're talking about all of these modalities we have available to us, but now even think about the generative content with new models that are going to be able to literally create text, video, audio at a moment's notice that could help you manage your knowledge better. So it's like there's so many places that this could go.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, even just having seen when ChatGPT 4.0 first got announced a couple of weeks ago, I remember watching the video and seeing the sort of like Copilot tutor thing that they had shown there, and my mind was just absolutely blown. So I can only imagine once you almost sort of have a personal knowledge management assistant sitting next to you, you're literally just gonna have, like, dad's had countless assistants at his job. You've just got some in the top right corner of your computer that is, there's a person, it's got a voice, it's got emotion, it's got inflection in its voice, and it's going to be aiding you with what you're doing on your computer. It's going to be just crazy because, like you said, on a moment's notice it can do anything. And not only will it be able to do anything on a moment's notice, it's going to have context beyond context that you can even think of. It's so crazy. There's so much potential for where this is going to go. I think this is going to be such a fun deep dive for us to do.
Well, now you've gotten to this place where it's like you start to think about, okay, that's exactly what I'm imagining. Is this place where knowledge management becomes literally you have this additional assistant that knows as much as you tell it, like as much information as you can put in, it will have all that context, and then also the context from like reading the entire internet. And then you'll be able to have that assistant aware of all your personal knowledge that you give it access to, and it will be able to synthesize and use that knowledge to help you accomplish all kinds of things. And that's, I guess, where I want to take this next is like, what do you start to do with that? But you can see how a knowledge management system like that would be extremely powerful, because it's not just a passive system. It's not just something that is, you're putting your knowledge into and you're having to reach back into to find. It could potentially surface that stuff for you at any moment. So when you have that available, what does it allow you to do?
Good lord. I mean, there are so many things which it allows you to do. I can't even start to fathom some of them, but some of the first things that come to my mind is it sort of gives you a way to never let your knowledge or interest in topics die. Like, you will always be able to find new things about whatever it is that may interest you. If it has the whole internet at its fingertips, then you never lose the risk of, maybe losing out on a YouTube video that you might never find, or finding some obscure content that is difficult to reach. It opens up this whole world of possibilities, because me as a car person, there is more car content on the internet than I could consume in 1,000 lifetimes. There are so many things in so many different spaces for so many different reasons that if I'm researching a very specific, car, say, just recently I was looking at a little old school BMW M3 because I was getting very curious about it. And man, there's like 40 or 50 videos that come up just about this car because it was so iconic. But am I going to be able to watch all of those videos and synthesize all of that information? There's no way that I'm capable of doing that in a reasonable time frame for what it's going to be worth for me. But if I have an assistant which can do all of that for me at the snap of my fingertips, man, it changes the entire game for what research, for what development, for what innovation all starts to look like on a personal level, and as even I've sort of started to think about on a more societal or like decentralized, almost like a marketable level. It's just crazy.
So it's, as you were talking about that, one of the things that stuck out to me was this idea that when you're doing research, there's like so much that you see, you'd be like, oh yeah, I would love to look at all of these things. And immediately that use case resonated because just it's actually funny in relationship to doing this deep dive. I started looking at, I was almost thinking like if I was to prototype my own, call it note taking app, but my own personal knowledge management system, I wanted to see what might be involved, and a big part of that would be integrating a text editor, like kind of in Notion, where you have the blocks of text and you can enter stuff in, and headings and text and images and whatever else. So I just wanted to see what that would take, and I found a bunch of stuff like videos, a few articles that I was like, yeah, this, I want to look into all of these things. And it would be great if I literally have a Notion page where I just put in maybe 15 links to things that I would want to look at to understand what is the space of rich text editors that I could use in my own applications, and all kinds of stuff related to just what AI apps currently can do, and all of, and it would be great if I could have an assistant that could just literally go, yeah, I'm going to look through every single one of these things and like tell you what you need to take away from all of it, right? That's a use case that I just, it would be amazing. It would change the way that I took notes, like right now, because I literally had to do that and put it into a backlog and hope that someday, at some point, I'm going to have time to look through all those things.
I mean, yeah, it really, like we said, it leverages your brain to do a lot of the things which it's good at. Like AI may be good at some of this creative and innovative stuff, but to me, it still feels like it's missing the human touch to an extent. But that is the whole other discussion for another time. But having these sort of abstract concepts and ideas which we want to execute upon requires a lot of data and research, and that's time consuming to do, let alone thinking through the processes of trying to create what you want to do, creating your own personal note taking app, like you said. That's incredibly time consuming. So think about how much time you would save on the research. The research would probably take you, I don't know, 20 hours, if not more. And then the work on it might take you another 20 hours just to get a good working prototype or whatever. You could basically chop that time in half. You've got 20 hours, you've got that working prototype. You haven't spent all the time doing research. You've got a working model now that you've spent. So it not only accelerates the processes that you have, but it can enhance them too, because as you're going, you give it feedback on the research that it's done for you, and it can do more research, and it just compounds on top of itself.
I'm glad that you took it back here because you're absolutely right. And I do want to emphasize this point that we are really thinking about the human side of this. Yes, obviously AI has made things different in the sense that it can do, computers can do things now they could never do before, but that doesn't mean that they can do everything that people can do, and I still don't think we're going to be there for quite a while. So to your point, we should be leveraging what it can do for us well. And that is in some of these cases, for example, summarizing a lot of research, surfacing details that might be relevant to you for your specific use case. I think there's, and we'll dive into this more as we figure out what are those capabilities. What is it that these systems can help us do that they are getting better at? But we need to then figure out, okay, if we can offload those things, what does that mean that we need to get better at? And that's exactly the point of this for me. Is it's like I want to know what skills I need to improve so that I can most effectively use the state of the art systems as they become more and more capable.
Yeah, that idea that you can really improve the skills that you can get good at, and that the computer can do for you. That's such a cool idea, because I mean, for me, thinking about as someone who has a great passion for racing, I would love to think about how a computer could help me research the data, the throttle traces, the brake trace, the steering inputs, all of the stuff like that, even suspension data, all of that stuff. You can take it in and have it analyze all of that stuff for you, and then if that could spit back out to me things in a format which isn't just raw data that I have to look through and interpret, or an engineer might have to look through and interpret and then translate to a driver. It's almost like going from language to language, like going from Spanish to English. Some of the things get lost in translation. Then if you're trying to take something from Spanish to Japanese, you might have to, if you're going through English to tell someone, you got people trying to communicate in three languages. Some things get lost in translation. But if you have an AI to sort of break it down and put it into a language which you can take in, I could come back in from a session of 15 laps, get all of that data synthesized for me, and essentially an instant take a swig of water, go back out and do my thing. And I could be, half a second faster a lap because of what it gained me on setup and technique. It makes me realize that a lot of the skills which I think the humans have the touch for, I use the word human touch again, but there are certain things which we do which AI cannot yet, or maybe will not, or shouldn't. That's another discussion. We've talked about what AI is capable of, should be capable of, might be capable of, but there are certainly things which we can maximize our potential for, which we won't need to, sort of put our energy towards, that a computer can offload for us.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of everything we've talked about at this point. And this is sort of the intent of our deep dive. We'll see exactly where it takes us, but ultimately, we are interested in the next generation of personal knowledge management and how we can be prepared for that and what that's even going to look like. And yeah, how we can best leverage it to do the things that we are good at as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful way to close it off. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before I close this out?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, if you guys want to stay tuned in through this deep dive with us or find more Wrong Idea content just like this, you can check us out at The Wrong Idea on Instagram, TikTok, and X. And until next time, keep being wrong.
Got a thought that challenges the norm? We want to hear it. Post your wrong idea with the hashtag wrong idea. That's RONG idea. And join the conversation. Who knows? Your perspective might just be featured in a future episode. Remember, in a world of endless perspectives, all ideas are wrong ideas. Until next time, keep thinking, keep challenging, and keep embracing the unconventional.